Hello, I'm Jim Howard with Trinity Security Allies. I got my beautiful wife and assistant, my partner in crime, Wendy Howard, not you, Kevin, helping me with this tonight. Tonight is a very special night for me because I am working with, and we're going to be talking here with my really good friend, Kevin Haggerty, with the God Logic Project. And we're just kind of doing a little bit of housekeeping. We're getting ready to kick it off. Tonight, we're going to be talking about PTSD and the thin blue line. If you have any questions that you would like to get to us, please go to the Q&A. Wendy will check the chat, but that's more for y'all talking back and forth. The Q&A we like to save because we go back and look at it later on to make sure that if there was a question that was asked, that we cover it. The last time we did one of the webinars, we had somebody asked a couple of questions and it ended up being the blog for the month. So you never know, So we're going to get started here. And so I'm going to get Kevin and I up online, and give me 1 second. And hang on, here we go. Stop sharing. All right, there we are.
There we are. I can see you.
Yeah. Kevin, it's good to have you out. It's kind of weird. Well, no, I can't say that. This is now the second time that you've been on, second or third time you've been on my
well, maybe the third. I think it's two, because we have the studio here, so most of the time we just come here and do it. But now with COVID and everything, we're kind of using technology.
Oh, you're killing me now. All right, so let me get this started. The other day, Kevin and I have done several different podcast webinars where we talked about some of the things that's been going on here in this world. And I mean, we're both kind of on the same page. We may disagree on certain little bits, but not much. But we talked about critical race theory. We talked about racism. We talked about police brutality. I mean, we've been having these conversations all along. And as I was talking to Kevin the other day, we kind of talked about, we're not taking a look at the other side. We seem to be blaming, police for everything. It seems like right now, the brutality, it's because of them that there's these issues and stuff like that. But we're not looking at the police point of view. So I thought it would be good, being that Kevin at one time didn't like policemen, and at one time I didn't like guys like Kevin. So, I thought it would be really good that because of the grace of Jesus Christ, I mean, let's be realistic about this. This is where we are at today, and this is really where it should be at all times. I mean, it's very difficult, and I understand that, but it's just one of these things of where we truly, as a church, really need to start reaching out to law enforcement and just ministering to them. They're hurting right now. And, like I said, I don't think a lot of people take a look at it from their point of view, which is one of these things that's just I mean, that's just not fair. It's unfair. So kind of tonight, we were going to kind of like talk a little bit of back and forth. I kind of want to start off with, like you, Kevin, talking about how, like we talked about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, how you felt about it. And then, like I said, where I would come in and talk about it, but then Christ, but then we also have to kind of like put this all together as two Christian men.
Well, and yeah, we look at it in my neighborhood that I grew up in. There was a kind of us against them mentality. So you look at 76 shootings in Chicago a couple of weeks ago on the weekend, most of which will go unsolved because nobody, regardless of how you feel about the person that was shot, regardless of your role in that community, you're not going to talk to cops. So there is, and we're now creating through the media and our politicians, we're magnifying that division or that mistrust of the police officers at a time where we need them the most, right? So, and unfortunately, in the communities where we need them the most. So we worry about 2019. There were 9 shootings by police officers of unarmed black men. That's going to double or triple this year, I bet, because now everybody thinks it's okay not to take a lawful command from the cops. And the cops have authority because we as citizens give them that authority, but we can't. What happens when we take it back is it's going to get very dangerous. And I mean, these cops are I mean, they make 40, 50 grand a year, whatever they make. At what point are they going to stop getting out of the car and helping people, right? Why would they, I couldn't imagine putting on a uniform every day and going into a situation where the people you're trying to help hate you, and you still got to help. I couldn't, talk about a Christian worldview or a Christian perspective or a servant's heart even. How long do you think we could possibly maintain that before they just stop showing up for things that could get them in trouble, if personal liability wise too, now some of the legislation. So it's a topic nobody really wants to talk about.
I tell you that when I go out to the academies or the EOT, which is the equivalency training, police officers from other states that would like to come to Florida and be police officers, I just have to look at them and go, why do you want to do it? Now, let me back up just a second when I say that. Florida is a different state. Florida is a different state of mind. You got a sheriff over here in Polk County that says, you can come protest all you want, but once you break into a house or riot, beware,
we're going to shoot you. Yeah.
Because our residents have guns. To go back to what you're talking about, and let me just give you a little personal, because it always felt like it was us and them. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is that when you get on the police department, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard young rookies, including myself, that would say, I want to help people. I mean, the motto, remember the LA motto used to be to protect and serve, that was, we wanted to be out here helping people. And the first time that you realize they don't want your help, they don't even want you there, but yet they called you, it turns into a different world. I got to tell a story. When I first went on the police department, you work with what they call a field training officer. So he took me out we were working 3 to 11, and he took me out to what we would call a fishing hole for policemen. Mm-hmm. And it's a place that we know that we can write a summons. If we sit there long enough, we'll see it. And what it was a road that merged onto another road, but there was a stop sign there. So you had to pull up to the stop sign and stop before you could go forward. Well, people blew it all the time. I mean, it was a perfect, you could write there all day long if you wanted to. So the first person that comes up and blows through the stop sign, we pull this guy over. Bobby Stewart was my field training officer's name. He gets out of the car, walks up to the guy and says, can I see your driver's license and registration? The guy says, what for? And Bobby says, you didn't come to a complete stop back there at the stoplight. And the guy was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I thought I did. And Bobby said, the guy hands him his driver's license and registration and everything. And Bobby says, just stand by, I'll be right back. We go back. He writes him a summons. And I'm sitting there going, gosh, this is easy. I mean, how difficult can this be, And so I watch him do it, and we go back and sit at the spot again. And here comes a lady that drive. Well, I didn't know it was a lady at first. I just saw the car. We can't tell who's driving.
Right.
We're just watching the sign, and here comes this car, blows right through it. So we pull it over, and I get out of the car, walk up. It's a lady, and I said, ma'am, can I have your driver's license registration? And she unloaded on me. What are you stopping me for? And I was taken back by her yelling at me. And I said, you did not come to a complete stop at the stop. I did too. Maybe you need to just get your eyes shut. I mean, she was screaming at me, and it totally threw me off. And, Bobby Stewart looked in the car and said, ma'am, give him your driver's license. We'll be right back. And I walked back to the car, and he said, welcome to police work, because that's what's, you're going to run into more than the guy that said, oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
And I had a reputation on my platoon of writing more tickets than anybody else on the platoon, but I also stopped twice as many people, because people that did not give me a hard time, did not, push it, were polite to me, just like I was polite to them. Most of the time I gave them a warning and said, have a nice day.
Yeah.
But, I had guys knew me. I had the 3-strike rule. If you irritated me 3 times, you got a summons, press hard 5 copies.
Yeah.
But, like I said, you get jaded. And it's not only while you're working, it's when you get off and they find out that you are a policeman, that things just the party stops almost.
Yeah.
You tried to hang out in the secular world, or not the secular world, the non-sworn world, and you can't, because they don't want to invite you, because they can't do the things they want to do when you're there. Yeah, because there's a cop there. And it's like, I tell you, Christianity, I'm telling you, when I got back to God and then started my career in Bel Air, it was a completely different outlook, a point of view. It wasn't us against them. It still was in a sense for them, but I felt compassion for them. I
Yeah.
felt sorry, not sorry for them, but I was like kids that we saw that had no parents. It broke my heart. You would see them everywhere. And so you kind of start looking at them as a human being now instead of this, bad guy that you're looking at or this, you know.
Yeah,
So
I have kind of a similar experience with the homeless folks out on 19. I've always been the guy that'd stop and give them $1 and everybody yells at me. But now I know some of them, so I'm friends with some of them. So it is hard to see guys that I've worked with in the past with drugs and alcohol back out panhandling on US 19, risking their lives in that traffic and everything else. But do you think that for cops, what I wonder now, it is, and I think it's exploitation by our politicians. So, but what do you think a cop is thinking when he's putting on that uniform in the morning, kissing his kids goodbye? I would be thinking to myself, I could sell cars and make 40,000 a year and not be good at it. Why am I doing this? Do you think you're seeing more of that? Are you hearing more of that? Or you think you will as time goes on?
well, I mean, we're seeing, okay. Um, you know, I had two brothers that joined the department after I did.
Mhm.
At 25 years, I had gotten a computer, almost like a computer degree, almost. Just never went from the paper. But I knew enough about computers and police work, police systems, public safety software, that I got picked up right away by another company. So I waited till 26 years till I'd get the fullest retirement that I could get, and then I left. But my brothers, one of them stayed till 30 and the other one stayed till 35. Well, now you have guys that had their 26 years in and go, that's it. I've had enough. I'm leaving. Now, when you have those leave, where's your experience?
Yeah.
These are the guys that have the experience that are, now you've got these young guys that have no experience at all that are moving up the ranks. And so, now you really got some confusion out here. It all, they talk about training. We're going to give police more money for training, They don't need the training. They just have to understand that, first off, we're not marriage counselors. We're not.
Yeah.
We have problems with our own weddings. You think
Yeah.
we're going to be able to go out and tell people this? We're not going to go out and hold somebody's hand who's coming down from a drug overdose or things like that. We're going to turn it over to paramedics or joke about it because that's kind of how we handle these things. I mean, seriously,
You
we're
almost
not.
have to.
Yeah, we have to. I mean, I saw a lot of changes in the police department. At one time, we would go into a house and see a female beat to the pulp by her husband, and we couldn't touch him. Because if she didn't go down and take out the warrant for him, she didn't file the charges, and she's not going to file the charges because he's the breadwinner.
Yeah.
So it was like we had our hands tied. The things that we would see, children that get abused. That's where we go into this thing of PTSD. We have a jaded sense of humor. We have a jaded lifestyle, and Christ, and really sitting down with other brothers. I mean, that's what we're starting to work on. We just, we're talking with a guy by the name of Cameron Allen, who is in. I mean, I just had this incredible conversation with him, and he explained everything to me in a, like more of a clinical term, but it all resonated as to what I had been through, what was going on. So now we're putting these officers out here. Think about it. Portland has gone for over 100 days of people screaming at them, throwing, bottles, fireworks, all these things like this. Somebody's going to snap in one of these nights. And that's like the excuse that they want.
It's almost the goal. And so they want the cop. They conflate definitions. First of all, you turn on CNN and they say mostly peaceful protests while the whole city's burning down. And then they don't really define what a peaceful protest is. So if I'm protesting civil rights movement style, that's a peaceful protest, right? If I am spitting on cops, if I'm cursing cops, is it still peaceful? If I'm vandalizing property, is it still peaceful? If I throw water on a cop, is it peaceful? If I throw frozen water bottle at a cop, is it still peaceful? At what point is it not peaceful? And the idea that we hold cops to a higher standard, which we should, but that standard can't be perfection. So you're not, if you expect that an imperfect human being, saved or unsaved, is going to be able to control themselves or behave to an idealistic utopian level, but then society doesn't have to. So if they truly wanted to fix things, let's be honest, I don't think they truly want to fix things. I think there's people that make a living at this that definitely don't want to fix these things. But if they wanted to fix it, would they take $1 million out of the NYPD budget, or would they reallocate $1 million or $1 billion? Give you an idea how big that police department is. But would they reallocate $1 billion to extra training or anything like that?
But we keep throwing it on the police department. We're not looking at the true problem. We're not looking at what is going on here. You know, one of the things that I remember so much, it used to just fire me up more than anything else, is when you would see a couple with a small child. It didn't matter what race it was, but you would see a couple with a small child, and they would walk by you and say, "Hey, if you're not good, I'm going to tell this policeman."
Yeah.
What are you teaching your children? What are you teaching your children? When we go and look at every single one of these, even the George Floyd case, I'm going to point this out. And if I get hate mail, you're not listening to me. What the officer did was wrong. Okay. I have no problem with that. But if George Floyd would have not resisted as much as he did, look at the body cameras of the police officers. That one officer might not even have been on the scene. I'm not really for sure. I haven't seen him. I don't know when he arrived to get involved in this. But the two officers that initially did the stop, if he would have got into the vehicle and just went downtown, like he was arrested. He had no other choice. They weren't going to unhandcuff him and let him go. If he would have just complied, it wouldn't have gone that way. When we take a look at the last one that they're talking about where this kid is still alive, watch the video. Good gosh, he had one of the officers in a headlock. They had tased him. He would not comply. The one with the spit sock on, I have dealt with people that don't have clothes on. It ain't easy, you know? And I promise you, you know, you're doing everything you can to not hurt the person. But after a period of time, you have to start thinking about you not getting hurt. Let me say one thing real quick. I did a blog on the churches getting involved and going and seeing law enforcement and going up to them and telling them, "Hey, I really appreciate what you do. Can I pray for you? Can I pray, you know, something? Can I pray for you on something or something like that?" You know what? The first out of the first four officers, 3 of them said that I go home tonight. Yeah. Now, what kind of, would you go to a job? You know, you were a plumber by trade. Would you go to a job as a plumber that you're thinking that I might not make it home tonight because the next client I go to see could possibly want to kill me? No, of course we wouldn't.
Why? And it would be, and no amount of money makes that okay. So you look at the guy in the last guy that was killed with the 7 shots.
Yeah.
The cops, it seems to me, and your background could explain this better, but those 2 cops are responsible not only for their own safety while he's reaching into the car, but what if he pulled out a gun and shot one of the bystanders? You know,
he had 3 kids in the car. What if he shot one of the kids?
Yeah, you're essentially responsible. You cannot allow him to reach into the car. You just can't. My guess is they would have shot anybody of any color. I would know not to reach in, I wouldn't fight with a cop generally anyway, unless I felt like he was trying to kill me. But no one in their right mind would reach into the car or disobey an order like that, except in this environment. So think about it. If now we're telling a whole generation, a whole demographic that those cops are here to kill you, And so you need to defend yourself. You need to do whatever you need to do. And I would do whatever I needed to do if I was in that situation. But now they've been given carte blanche not to listen. So have we not exacerbated the problem? And our politicians and our media have now put cops and, by the way, bad guys or at least civilians in a terrible position right now. So now it's got to be 10 times worse this year than it was last year.
Well, and let's look at something else too. Political leaders went to this guy's in Kenosha, the guy in Kenosha, went to his hospital. Did they contact the victims of the rape? He had sexually raped a woman.
Yeah.
Did they contact her? Did they
She's
contact
14
her?
years old, by the way.
Huh?
She's 14 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Did they contact her? I mean, it always amazed me. It always amazed me that it would be something very simple. Something very simple. There was we used to have this a failure to move on. They got rid of it, but there was a failure to move. It's kind of a catch-all. You'd have a crime scene. You'd have a fight. People would start to gather. You'd say, you got to leave. If they didn't leave, you'd arrest them for failure to move on.
Yeah.
So we had a scene one night that this guy showed up and he was running his mouth and he wasn't even involved in it. He just was running his mouth. And so the officer said, okay, I'm going to issue a summons for failure to move on. We told you to move on, and he didn't. So we asked for his ID. He pulls out his ID, and he hands it to the officer, and the officer takes a look at it and goes, oh, you're now under arrest for felony drugs because he had a hit of LSD acid in his stupid driver's license. Really? But what I was going to get at, so many times you went for a simple arrest, just a simple arrest, and ended up having to fight these people.
Yeah.
A stoplight violation. A guy accused me of stopping him because he was black. He blew through the stoplight, did not even know what color he was, could not have told you. I couldn't tell you whether it was a male or female or what. And when I stopped him, he claimed that I did it because he was black. He got out of the car and wanted to fight over a stoplight violation.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me.
And we see local politicians, councilmen and stuff like that. I've seen all sorts of videos on the news where local politicians have played the race card, and then the body cams have debunked what they said. Why? So here's the question. We send people to Afghanistan. My nephew just got back from Afghanistan, right? I had a chance to talk to him when it was just me and him, and he got a little choked up. It was scary. But then they go for 9 months, and then he's home back up. Well, he's at Fort Bragg for another 3 months or whatever. They're going to redeploy him. But for a cop, he does a 8, 10, 12-hour shift or whatever it is, goes home for 8 or 10 hours, then puts on the uniform and goes back and does it again, right? Over and over and over again. How many days a year do you go back to work? Yeah. And so how do we see post-traumatic stress disorder in soldiers, but we think we don't see it in police officers, right? And
that's the sad part. And Cameron, the guy that I was talking about, Cameron Allen, he was telling me that when they work with PTSD with military personnel, you have to understand they've been removed from the battlefield and now they're back over here.
Yeah.
Okay? With police officers, it's just like what you just said. They're going back to it every single day.
Yeah.
They're not now. They can request transfer. A lot of it has to do, and one of the things that, like I said, we're working with. You have a situation where you can't sleep. You've been involved in something that it just keeps you awake at night. And an officer gets killed. You had to shoot somebody. You saw the death of a child. I had one night where I almost shot my paper boy. And when you talk about what happened, everybody would have said I would have been justified, but it would have haunted me for the rest of my life.
It wouldn't change it for you, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't change it for me. I got to live with it, Yeah. And so we were talking about like triggers when things, they trigger us. We see something or something happens that it triggers us and we go back to it. But, it's one of these things of where you can go to your EAP, your Employees Assistant Program, and you can say, I'd like to talk to a counselor. Well, now you're red flagged. Okay. Yeah. Why do you need to talk to a counselor? Well, what is the reason behind it? And trust me, if you think those sessions are private,
not
really, if they're being paid by the city, They kind of want to know, should we be concerned here? And you may be one of the best policemen out there, but you just want to talk to somebody about some of the things that you've seen. But yet, like I said, you've now been red flagged. They'll pull your supervisor in and say, hey, you might want to watch Jim while he's out on the street.
Yeah.
Something's not right now. You don't know what it is. It could be a childhood issue that creeped up on them and they're trying to deal with it. How many times we talk about it, that people who have been violated, I mean, physically, sexually, all these different things like that, sometimes don't even remember it until later on in life, and it comes back to them. So, if the churches do not get behind our brothers and sisters out here, the first responders, I am so afraid. Listen, we're under attack right now, and you know that. I mean, look at California. You got 2 churches out there that they've gone full bore against. I just came back from Kentucky, and they were talking about that in Louisville. The health department was on them over everything. If you had a guy sneeze and you didn't rush him out, they were probably going to, what are you doing here? We'll close you down. So, I was just reading an article, and it wasn't here. It was in Australia. I believe it was Australia or New Zealand, where they were threatening to put pastors in jail if they held church services.
Yeah. And here in Florida, we don't right now, we're a red state, but we tend to go blue sometimes. We're purple. But in where we are in Pasco County, we're lucky enough to have a sheriff that he came out and said, I'm not arresting people for going to church. So you can forget about it, whatever law you want to write. But we have that luxury.
Right.
But what about the rest of the country? Certainly New York City, Chicago, Baltimore, all of California, most of California, the church gatherings are already on their radar. So they have no problems with peaceful protests where people die spreading COVID, but they're worried about a church service spreading COVID. So California, they said you're not allowed to sing in church because you might spittle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and have you noticed that we haven't gotten any numbers from the protests as far as spreading the COVID, the virus, but yet CNN did almost like a 2 or 3 day story about one guy going into a church setting and spreading the COVID to 91 people.
Yeah.
And then how that 91 people, oh my gosh, might have spread it to another, it's like, you tell a friend and you tell a friend and you
they just did it with the Sturgis bike rally too. So they just said
exactly.
that
and they
Sturgis,
say, oh, they're hiding that. They're hiding that,
So but for, so there's an hypocrisy, but here's what I don't understand from the left side of things, if we can say left and right. They, it seems to me CNN has no skin in this game. Why are they so obsessed with vilifying police officers? So I can understand if you're a community organizer and your grants depend on you having something to organize, right? And this is an opportunity to sell books or get on CNN, raise your political clout or your social media clout. They have a financial interest in overblowing this thing. What about the politicians and what about CNN or the news networks? Why would they? I don't see how they benefit from it, except for, what we talked about the other day. They are now the public relations wing of their given political party. Fox for the Republicans and everybody else for the Democrats.
Well, I'm glad you kind of asked that. I kind of think it was a rhetorical question, really, though. But if you remember, and I've got the newspaper article somewhere out here, when President Obama was elected as a president, he wanted to have a national police department. If you look at other countries, you talk to Simon, it's a country police department. You have little boroughs and things like that where you may have a chief that runs that borough and stuff.
Yeah.
But it is a national police department. If you look at Japan, I remember we had Japanese officers came over and they said, our department's 1 million Japanese officers. And I was like, 1 million? And he goes, yeah, it covers the whole country. And they had 3 deaths. I mean, in a year, they had 3 deaths. 2 of them were traffic accidents. And one was actually a mental lady who stabbed one of their officers in the chest with a knife. We've had 36 so far this year, where last year we had 30. And a lot of them are ambushes and things like that, because exactly what you're talking. Look, You know as well as I do, Satan is alive and well and dancing in the street.
Oh yeah.
Because the only way you can destroy this country is to get rid of the police department, put racism in it as the cause for all of it. I mean, if we look at Trump right now, Trump just canceled critical race theory training in the federal government. Why did we even have it there? You know, they're talking about military personnel. Every year we would have this training that would be this, you know, how to get along with everybody type training. And it was like every year it got weirder and just stranger, you know, and some of it was good. Don't get me wrong. Some of it was good. Something I learned, I'll tell you one right now, is that they would tell us that if we saw a black man walking down the street, that they wanted eye contact. Now, we just didn't do it in the past because it was kind of a word that we won't use here, but it was eye something. And he said, no, we want to be recognized as a person. Hey, I'm all game for that one. I'll recognize you as a person if that puts us at a level playing field that we're equal with each other. I love it. I love it. But yet it gets skewed now. Now it's, if you look at me and say hello, it's a racial thing because you're thinking racial thoughts because I know you are and you don't know it, but I know you are. It's just bizarre. It's crazy.
A podcast that I watch and like, and his catchphrase is, "We don't give a shit about your feelings," or something along those lines. And he was interviewing two black special forces guys, and they said that first of all, they said America was never great. Now, these are military, all three of the military guys. I'm a plumber, and I can tell you, I can name off times when America was exceptionally great. The Civil War was pretty great. The Civil Rights Movement was pretty great. Liberating Europe was pretty great, right? We did a lot of, America was great. We were never perfect, but we were great in a lot of instances. But their argument was they can tell a guy was racist by the look in his eyes, that once you've seen the look of racism. But now that's no burden of proof. In other words, I would like to know, even if I think the guy in Minneapolis should be charged and convicted of something, but how do we know race was even the motive of it? You know,
it wasn't the motive. The motive was they got a call. There has to be some
standard besides white cop, black perpetrator or victim, whatever you want to call it. But that can't be the standard of the burden of proof that it was a racial incident. Now, so then I think to myself, as a non-cop person and not the biggest fan of cops, even still in my sober life, but I'd like to know if that cop has a history of racial insensitivity or whatever. And everybody would like to know that, especially for the guy in Minnesota. But nobody seems to want to go into the backgrounds of the guy that just raped a 14-year-old girl. So it goes to the character of the person at the time of the conflict, just like it would looking into the backgrounds of the cops. But nobody seems to be able to, as far as I know, and I don't follow this stuff every day. But do we have any of these cops members of the alt-right or
understand
KKK guys or things like that?
Understand something. We have what we call a jacket or our folder, okay? It's open to the public. So I can tell you right now, if there was something, because if we go back and we look at the George Floyd case, they immediately went and said, oh my gosh, this guy has, 18 complaints, 18 or 19 complaints on him of unnecessary force. Okay. So they had that out right off the bat. I mean, it wasn't, we knew everything about this guy. We knew everything. We knew this guy was hard-handed because of the place he worked at. We've not heard, and trust me, they can get that information if they want it. So what it tells me is somebody probably has asked for that information and there's nothing there. So they kind of want to tread lightly on it because they don't want to accuse this guy, because there have been cases where law enforcement officers have sued newspapers for falsely saying things on them and won. I mean, we had one in Norfolk where they blamed these two police officers for being racist, and they had a spectacular career, and they sued. There was no basis on it at all. They just shot off, around across the bow.
Like the Covington Catholic kid. Yeah. So let me ask you this, and I'll give you kind of a real scenario that happened to me in the last few years. over custody stuff. And I'll paint a bit of a picture for you. Tell me what you think. I lived in Holiday, so I didn't live in a great neighborhood in Pasco County. There was a dispute between my drug addict, now deceased son's mother, and myself over what was the best idea, who was the best to take care of AJ. Neither here nor there. But every time I dealt with the cops in that situation, on that same issue, they always wanted to arrest me. They always wanted to blame. They were so used to the man being the bad guy. And this is my guess, and you tell me. I'm thinking that they're in Holiday, right? So they're already thinking they got white trash or drug addict or whatever. I was a plumber, so I looked like white trash drug addict. But they were always blaming me for the situation. Or one guy, said, "I'm going to arrest you," and they cuffed me and put me in a car. And the other guy turned on the air conditioner and helped me out a little bit. But you think they get so used to the white guy being the bad guy, drug addict, and the woman being the victim that they don't. It seemed to me like they didn't care what I had to say or to paint any kind of picture at all. They just wanted me to shut up, me to do what I'm told, me to comply, me to give my son over to a drug addict who recently overdosed. So I feel somewhat vindicated, right? Do you think it seemed to me like some of them, not all of them, some of the cops were like, just keep your mouth shut and this will be over in a few minutes. But sometimes I couldn't keep my mouth shut. But it just seemed like they were so used to dealing with what they thought were people like me that now they've got a plumber, has a college education, and they didn't want to hear a thing out of me, but yet it seemed like they were bending over backwards for the drug addict that just robbed somebody with my son there,
And listen, you're telling me stories that I had one of my good friends was got into basically a fight between he and his girlfriend. They were both throwing punches. They had a child out of wedlock, a very young, it might have been a year old, but it was still an infant in some sense. And when the police were called, they were going to take both of them because they couldn't figure out who was, the combative person. And so he volunteers. He says, "Look, I started it." He's trying to be the nice guy. That's what he said. And he shows up at my Bible study and he says, "Hey, I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to go and do what they tell me to do. And then it'll be over with." Oh no, they put him through the ringer. He would call me at times just out of his mind thinking, what did I do to deserve this?
Why did I volunteer for this?
Yeah. Why did I volunteer? Yeah. Why not let her go, or both of us go so we could both look bad. But they had him, he was having to blow. She kept saying over and over and over again that he was an alcoholic and he hid it well. And they were having him blow in a machine every 2 hours. Yeah. And so he'd be at a business meeting. And I mean, he's an executive type guy. And he would have to say, "Excuse me, I'll be right back," while he ran down to his vehicle and blew in the machine, because if he didn't, he was in violation of the court order. So let me go to this. Yes, we as police officers, we take the female because it's the weaker sex. This is what we've always been taught. We've been taught this. But now I have, over my years of being in law enforcement, have come to realize that it doesn't matter. I say this all the time. There's 3 sides to every story. There's his side, there's her side, and there's the truth down the middle. But like I said, we weren't raised in police departments to be marriage counselors.
Yeah.
We don't want to be there. We're having problems at home, and now we walk in to your house and there's yelling and screaming. And it's kind of, you said something that I'm gonna have to go back on you. You said, the officer said, "If you'll just be quiet and let us get through this," but there were times where you couldn't. Yeah. So you're combative in there also. And so when we walk into this over and over and over again, listen, when I went on the police department, I weighed 155 pounds. I was pencil thin. Because of stress and everything else, I went to 220. Okay. Yeah. Bad eating habits, sitting in a police car, all these things like that. Doctor told me I was going to die at an early age because of, just being overweight and all these things like this. And physical fitness became my religion. Yeah. Shoot, when Wendy and I met, I was at 12% body fat.
Before you were saved?
Huh?
Before you got saved?
Yeah. I I was mad at God during this time frame.
Yeah.
Really, God, you allow this, you allow these people to do these things to children, really,
Yeah.
and see, I couldn't grasp that God didn't allow it. This is sin in the world that allows it,
Yeah.
but like I said, when you're driving down the street and 10-year-olds are pointing their finger at you, shooting you, who's telling them that,
And how, yeah. So how dehumanizing is that? That's, so if you say you file a complaint because the Gap girl was watching you in Gap and you say it's because you're black, I got news for you. When back in the day when I had a tank top and muscles and my head shaved, they watched me everywhere I went, and so it was clearly I fit a stereotype of some sort. I should say with the scenario I gave you, there was no violence involved. They said you're giving your son to the mother, and I said no, I'm not, and that's how it.
Well,
It wasn't a domestic violence thing.
Yeah,
They didn't
in
report me.
scenarios like that.
In fact, I'm the one that called them. I called
Yeah.
them before
Yeah.
they called me.
But what I tell people in scenarios like that, what I would have done is I would have looked at you and said, go to the court and get this order. Because if you got that piece of paper in your hand, there's no discussion. We have to obey it. And what happens is they try to handle it. We're going to do this admirably. We're not going to get attorneys involved. We're not going to get law involved. We're just going to go out here and we're going to be human beings. Well, guess what? Human beings get a couple of drinks in them, get mad, get drunk, get drugged up. The next thing you know. But I wanted to go back to something you said there. You said you tank top, muscled up, bald headed, and stuff like that. One of my really good friends called me racist, and I looked at him and said, "I'm not racist. I'm biased. There's a big difference between the two." And I said, because if I see a guy that walks into a place of business like what you're talking about, and he's got a Confederate flag tank top on, bald, with a Nazi swastika tattooed on, I'm looking at him thinking this is trouble. That's just all there is to it. If I see a black man walk in with Black Lives Matters and his pants hanging down to his knees, I'm seeing the same thing. So please understand, this is the way America is. America is, period. If you're Black Lives Matters and see a Trump supporter, it's instant fighting. You two may have a lot more in common. You may have kids. You may, look, if you're talking about lives mattering, okay, fine, but we may have kids. You may have a kid that had cancer or something like that. This guy over here has a kid with cancer. You don't think that's going to bring you together? Get rid of this crap that we're carrying and start treating each other like you should be treating.
Well, I'll go out on a limb and say that and I'm not surprised, by the way, of your theory of the federal police department, because I've had that same idea. Why else would they break down local police departments except for the federal government to have even more power? I'm not a federal government. I'm not a big federal government guy. I think the closer to the people the government is, the better off you are. But you take this type of situation, a very emotional situation, and you try to out emotion the other person, you're only making it worse.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me that if a plumber can come up with that, then it would seem to me that a politician, a lawyer, the editor at the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, for that matter, they should be able to look at these things and say, is the intent of what you're saying here is not the Atlantic article with Trump recently. I read my friend posted it. I opened it up. Nobody reads the articles. I opened it up, read the articles, and it starts with 4 unnamed sources, blah, 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 blah. So as soon as I read that, I'm like, well, we're done, because 4 unnamed sources still gives you 0, right? But most people will just read the headlines. Most people will deal with these, will make their decisions based on the surface. So how do we then deal with the righteous complaints of the African American community and deal with the righteous concerns of the police community? Is there even a way to do that?
Well, there's not, until we change the country, period. I mean, I'm going to go out. You and I talked about Bodie Bachman. We've talked about him.
Yeah. Big fan.
I mean, these are black leaders. This isn't me. This isn't Jim Howard. But I'm going to throw one out here that everybody knows, and that's Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
Go listen to him talk about the father missing in the black children's home. Let's go talk about that. So until we start to look, there is an issue here. There is a true issue here. And I don't have the answer. I know what I think of the answer, and the answer is God. But of course, in the fallen world, we're not fighting flesh and blood. We're fighting the evil spirits from the heavenly realm. I mean, let's be realistic about it. And until I just feel like that unless there's a revival that happens here, that people start to come around, but it has to be white and black. I can go and show black preachers who are telling black people to come back to black church because the white people don't want them in their churches, which isn't true. Yeah. I mean, your church isn't that way. My church isn't that way.
And that's the preachers.
That's the preacher. That's the preacher. So, until we truly have a revival here, I don't have a good answer for it. Because I do not see, look, you continue to take away. I'll tell you another real quick story that the other day we met with a guy. I'm not going to list his name right now because he might not want me to tell this story, but he's going to be at our conference. And when I met him, and you'll be at our conference, so you'll know who I'm talking about now. But when I met him, this guy's 6'5", 6'6". I mean, he's like a football player. He's, he's a mile wide, And we sat down and started talking, and he told me that he was with the police department. Outside of Kansas City, and we were talking about the chokehold because they've taken it away from us. I cannot tell you how many times I used the chokehold the right way, and it is an incredible way to hold on to a person and get that person to stop fighting. And he said the same thing. He says, as big as I am, he said, when I would put a person in a chokehold, he said, I had 0 complaints against me. He said, when I had to go hands-on and manhandle the person, he said, every one of them complained on me. Yeah. So you take away that tool. See, that's the tool that I think they took away from Kenosha. I think in Kenosha, if an officer could have got into that position and got to where he had a chokehold on that person, it might have went a different way. I know how powerful of a tool it was for me. But as I was watching these guys chase him around the car, they were trying to taser him. They grabbed his shirt. They did not go hands on. So
and that is interesting because I'm not a cop, but I was looking at the beginning of that tape when they're chasing around the car as what I'm guessing for a cop or somebody that trains cops like you, that's got to be some of the shoddiest police work that you could imagine. I mean, they in a sense they started off by being in a terrible position, chasing a guy towards his door.
Yeah.
Both coming around the same side of the car. A couple of things that, I mean, how it got that far seems to me like weak police work. And that's a whole nother podcast. We could talk about what I think about the buildup of police departments since 9/11 and stuff.
It's going back to rules of engagement. You continuously take the tools away from me. I can't engage anymore. Yeah, and this is where the only thing I can, the taser does not work. And I've trained taser, dart fire and stun guns, what we call. I've done that class. I've trained that class. And we always say you got to have a plan B. You cannot depend on this. It's a great tool. Yeah, it works great. But you got to have a plan B in case of what we saw with this guy here. He wasn't going down. He knew how to work it. He knew how to work the taser. And so when I watched that video, I'm thinking to myself, guys, you got to go hands on. But we have started to restrict them and said, you can't use this chokehold. Really? Yeah. I'd have been on that guy's back, holding on to him, riding him to the ground. We would have went to the ground. I mean, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
But
so guys, we're about 50 minutes into this, and we've got about 10 minutes left, and we do have some comments and some questions.
Women always spoil our fun.
She's the boss of us, bro.
Yeah, I am. I've got to shut you guys down and take care of this. So Jim Markowski, back about 20 minutes ago, made a comment. Most police departments do not have peer support counselors as a sworn police officer. If they establish a PSC only after major incidents involving PD, all about money and lack of training. So we've got 2 more after that, but if you want to talk about that for just a second.
We had a councilman with the city of Norfolk that every time he was a black councilman, and every time there was any incident with a black person, the black person was always innocent. And they could be a cocaine dealer with a gun in their hand, and the officers did everything that they were supposed to do, and they end up this guy dying. Then it was a murder. He would go on the radio. He'd go on one of the local radios and say, "These police officers are murdering people left and right." Yeah, you take away the funding. Look, gosh, I hate to say this. You can put all the money you want to in the world. It's just like our public school system. You can put all the money you want to in there until you get certain things taken care of on the other side. Now, public school system is a different thing, another podcast. But until we get people on the other side, if you would just comply, have your day in court. Have your day in court. People don't realize a lot of these judges that are up there on the stand have been attorneys that were defense attorneys and don't like policemen. And if you don't have all your ducks in a row, you're going to lose your case. And so, like I said, it has to work on both sides. You want us to. I went to Bel Air real quick. I went to Bel Air during December. I did a ride along. People were waving and wishing me a Merry Christmas, not flipping me off, waving at me, bringing stuff in that we would eat, because in Norfolk, if you brought stuff in, it went right in the trash. We didn't know where it's coming from. We would eat. I thought I died and gone to heaven. But I mean, it has to come from both sides. I'm sorry, folks. You're going to continue to tell me this over and over and over. Systemic racism, no, I'm not going to listen to you. Because until both sides of the fence get together and say, hey, we have the same things in common. We want to raise our families in a peaceful environment. We want you to come and help us if we need you, but yet we will comply. We will comply. Just understand that you don't need to be, boss hogs or anybody like that that's going to walk over somebody. We'll work with you. Then we got a conversation going. We got a conversation going.
Okay, from John Perone, tomorrow is the 19th anniversary of 9/11, and there hasn't been any coverage of that from what I've seen so far. I remember where I was and what I was doing that day, on that tragic day, when that tragic event happened. The country came together stronger than I have ever seen in my life following that. The support behind all of the first responders was unbelievably amazing. It's absolutely shocking at how far we've fallen as a united country since then. What do you think we as individuals, counties, states, and I'm going to throw in there churches, can do to get back to how we were following that tragic event without it taking another tragic event to do so?
Kevin, go.
I'm a New Yorker, so 9/11 I watched from Florida, broke my heart. I cried. I watched with my then probably 5-year-old daughter, or 7 or 8-year-old daughter. And a lot of those people, I lost people in the towers. A lot of the people that I was related to or friends with, people that spent the whole year digging through that rubble. The feeling on September 12th, when you couldn't buy a flag, was amazing. But in my head, I'll be honest with you, I thought to myself, we're going to go to war over this. And the same people that are playing Kumbaya on Wall Street right now with candles are going to be burning those flags that they bought. And so there is a bigger problem, and it is a spiritual problem. It is calling good evil and evil good. Moral relativism, non-scriptural relativism, morality has really. If you take the pandemic, this is something that should have united our country. Mm-hmm. Right? If something like a nationwide or a global pandemic should bring us together, and it divided us. And not only did it divide us, how did it divide us? It divided us along political lines, right? So I can tell you, and I'm kind of cynical, but I can tell you, your politicians and your media do not care one way or another. They have an agenda. Whether they hate Trump or whatever the agenda is, I wouldn't expect to see that kind of patriotism ever again. I think when we got Osama bin Laden, we had one night or 2 nights of unity again, and it felt good. As a pastor, I can tell you I struggle with the balance between my calling as a pastor and my patriotism. I've always been very patriotic since, I quit drinking and drugging and criminalizing years ago. And my prognosis isn't good. I don't see us ever being on that page again. And I think that we're being manipulated by people that have a whole different, larger agenda, like a national police force.
And just to say that, Wendy and Jessica were in Iowa on 9/11, supposedly flying back. And I was in DC working. And when the first plane hit the first tower, I called her on the phone because everybody thought it was an accident. And I called her on when I called her on the phone, and she didn't know anything about it, and was getting ready to go to the airport and board her plane to come back home to DC. And when the second plane hit, she called me and said all the flights have been canceled. So, I had a friend that worked for the Arlington Police Department. I had just left the police department. I wanted to go and see what I could do to help out. I mean, it was all I could do to stand there in that office. I worked the whole day. People were watching the television all day. I was doing something. I couldn't sit still because of knowing that I needed to be right back in the middle of it. Yeah. Okay, to go back to John's question, I will say this much. I did heard the tunnel for heroes, or Towers for Heroes, was going to shine the light, because they were talking about they weren't going to because of the COVID. Corona. And I heard that they are going to. I'm hoping that they do. Fox has been I've been watching it all day. They've been playing commercials all day long. Never forget, never forget. And so I'm hoping that we will be hearing from them at least tomorrow about this. Kevin, you and I agree on it so much that this is such a fallen world that unless we have a change, a revival of some sort, we're not going to recover. We are not going to recover. And I talk about getting out and voting. And let me just say this. I'm not going to say the candidate, but I'll give you 3 or 4 things. I got to count them again. If you're pro-life, there's only one person to vote for. If you're pro-military, there's only one person to vote for. If you're pro-police, there's only one person to vote for. And if you're pro-smaller government, there's only one person to vote for. Yeah. So you take those 4 things right there. I said something the other night about you may have to hold your nose and go in and vote, but there's really only one true candidate in that. I'm sorry, you can't show me the guy in the basement is just using everybody else. He's mimicking the guy that did it this year, that did it the last 4 years. He's mimicking him to try to win that support, but we know who is behind him. That's the thing that scares me more than anything else. And maybe not for you and me, because we're kind of getting up in our age, but our kids and our grandkids, I worry about them. I truly do.
Okay, we are coming upon an hour, so so Jim Markowski, on Kevin's example, could he have been cuffed because they were removing the bigger threat from the scene? Is that a possibility?
Sure, it's a possibility. I mean, but I don't know that I would do it. I have a rule. I will tell you this. In fact, I kind of saw it when I went to Port Richey. If I have to touch somebody, they've got to go downtown. That's just all there is to it. I got to put a charge on them. So could I have walked him outside and told him, listen, you have one. I always like to do 2 choices. You have 2 choices. You can continue to be the, mouthy guy that you are right now and end up in the back of my car, or you can give me an opportunity to see if I can diffuse this, and I'll come and talk to you, which is exactly what they should have done. Exactly what they should have done.
Well, we were talking about where my son was, so it was very emotional to begin with. And he said, shut up, or I'm going to arrest you. And I said, well, why don't you go find my son and you can do whatever you want? And he arrested me.
Well, and see, but he's not putting himself in your position, which is the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
Because that is a highly emotional thing right there. We went to a call one night. We had gotten a call that a woman had been arrested and her 1-day-old child was in the bed at her apartment by herself. We went there, got the landlord, the guy, janitor to let us in. And sure enough, there was the birth certificate and a 1-day-old child in between 2 pillows with the television running. And the mother had been arrested for shoplifting CDs, not bread, not water, not diapers. And the officer that had the original call had 10 kids of his own, lost his mind. Lost his mind. I had to relieve him. I had to tell him, go, I'm going to get another officer in here because you can't handle this right now. That's emotion. That's what we see. Next question.
Okay, we're at the 1 hour mark. So Jim Markowski, my first question involved peer support counselor for PTSD and not defense attorney. So he was just making a comment. And then Melissa Brown, when you were talking about the election, more importantly, it is about the Supreme Court justices.
That's number 5 there, Melissa. That's number 5. I'll throw that one in there.
I'll tell you that I voted for I compared the vice presidents 4 years ago, and I considered the Supreme Court when I voted last year, in 2016. Yeah.
And hey, we'll go over an hour if people want to stick around. We're here for them.
Well, you've had a couple drop off. You should. So I'm just letting you know. All right, there's no more questions at this point.
All right. Kevin, you got any last words before we kind of go into our close up?
No, I think my continuous prayer, I think, is I find myself considering that people just need to now more than ever, the gospel message, if nothing else, is a message of personal responsibility. It is a personal relationship between you and your creator. It has nothing to do with Pastor Kevin, if you're going to heaven or not. And I think personal responsibility on so many levels is what's missing. And therefore the gospel message is what's missing. So had we not removed God and the Judeo-Christian values that come along with scripture from our society 60 years ago, progressively for 60 years, I don't even think we're having this conversation. Not that the world was perfect back then, but I think we at least stood a chance of solving problems. Now, as we take away personal responsibility altogether, so we no longer blame the bad guy, but we blame the circumstances the bad guy's in. I can tell you, as somebody that deals with bad guys on a daily basis and tries to make them functional members of society again when they get out of prison or whatever their story is, if it doesn't start with sympathy, that has to end. It starts with, what are you going to do today to get through today, right? Just be reasonably happy and be not hurt anybody, help somebody and learn something new. It's really pretty easy formula.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more that, but this is in law enforcement also. When the guy, has had 3 marriages and you're looking at him saying, what's the common denominator? It's you. Yeah. There has to be a change in your life. Yeah. And if you want to be a better person, that doesn't mean that we're not warriors anymore. I think Christians are more warriors than anybody else because of what they have to put up with. But until we get law enforcement to understand that too, we could, I don't know. I just don't know. But I think that we're in for a long road. I think it's going to be, get ready. I mean, you got to be carrying the shield. You got to be ready for battle because it's coming.
I don't think we've even begun to see the violence we're going to see.
I don't either.
Because of that separation from God. I would say that pretty confidently.
Yeah. Well, anyway, hang on a little bit. I'm going to run through our stuff and then we'll say goodnight to everybody, but got to do the commercials. That's just, got to do it. And
pay the bills.
Pay the bills. Yeah. So, okay. Come on. All right. Discussion questions. We did that. Facebook Live on Sunday nights, 8:00 p.m. We always have some sort of topic that we're talking about. We did talk about the conference that's coming up. We're really excited about that. Resources. We have a YouTube channel, and you can go out and find us out there. We also do a lot of work on Facebook. Kevin, this is my favorite picture of you right here, brother.
I look pretty cool there.
You look, you are cool here, And Kevin has got his YouTube page also. He's out there. Kevin is out there. The God Logic Project, go subscribe, go like his stuff. He's got some incredible stuff. He talks about anything and everything that has to do with today's world and a Christian point of view about it. The man's great. We have free resources out there for you. Trinity Security Allies. We have the free resources. The putting together a safety plan, developing a safety team. You need those right now because we're coming back into the church. We need to be ready. Carrying weapons in the church, and also Sunday morning, what to look for. Our 4th annual Church Safety and Liability Conference. We're having it on October the 17th, 2020. Registration and breakfast is at 7:30 to 8 o'clock, and then we're going to get started, and we're going from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock. We are there. We're ready to go. We're really excited about this because we got a lot of great speakers that are coming out here. Cameron Allen, that is the gentleman that I was talking about the brain and helping with PTSD. Corporal Alan Wilkett, he's not a corporal anymore. He's on his own. He's doing great. Kevin Smith, Ricky Rooks, really nice guy with USCCA. Patrick Ledoux, he is an attorney that you would like to know that if you ever had an issue going against your church. Michael Fallon with Sovereign Nations, myself, Ryan Burke, will be talking about preparedness, Stop the Bleed in TITEC, and Sandra Smith, we had a conversation with her yesterday. Fantastic conversation. Protect My Ministry. It's all about keeping the children safe. Membership, ways to support us, $125 for a church. That gives you training. It also gives you 5 slots to the conference. Online membership, of course, gives you online to our training that is under the YouTube. We also do offer training and donations. We're always looking. USCCA, cannot say enough about this. If you carry a weapon, you need to have something like USCCA to protect yourself in case you get into trouble. Talking to Ricky said that if in these situations, because people have asked me, where people get in your face and they're screaming at you, they're yelling at you and all stuff like this, if you push them away, that is considered force. USCCA will still help you with that. So the USCCA provides top-notch education, training, self-defense, legal protection for all responsible armed Americans. Join now to gain true peace of mind with USCCA's legal and financial protection. And I think, oh, come on. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate you being here. God bless you. Please be safe out there. If you have anything that you need, contact Kevin too, because Kevin's great as far as talking about the Lord. He is fantastic. I could talk with him for hours. God bless you.
Yeah,
good
we
night.
usually do.
We always do. So y'all have a good night.